If you told me a year ago I'd spend the evening alone in my small house on the edge of Boston, drinking lukewarm coffee and listening to the Red Sox lose on the radio, I'd have laughed in your face. But there I was, rain tapping the window, the ghost of my late wife Lorraine in every quiet corner. My daughter, Emily, burst through the door like a summer storm, cheeks flushed, eyes bright with that stubborn look I knew too well. "Dad, I'm getting married," she announced, thrusting her left hand forward so the diamond caught the lamp light and sent sparks across the room. My hand shook as I set down my mug, a habit left over from 1,000 business meetings. "To who?" I managed, already suspecting the answer. "Last night, on the pier in Hyannis. Nate proposed. We're doing this, Dad. In 7 weeks. At the Cape. We're not waiting anymore." 7 weeks? My head spun. "That's soon, honey." She rolled her eyes, impatience simmering beneath the excitement. "I'm 30, Dad. I know what I want. Nate and I have it all planned out. It's going to be perfect. We want something elegant, big, with everyone there, just like you and Mom had." I forced a smile, remembering Lorraine's laugh echoing across Cape Cod dunes decades ago. I could still picture her in her sundress, sand between her toes, planning our future on the back of a napkin at that tiny clam shack. "What do you need from me, Em?" Her answer came without hesitation. "We want you to help pay for it. Like you promised Mom you would. The Pelham house, right on the beach. Nate's friend is giving us a deal, but it's still going to run about 60 grand, all in. Flowers, band, catering, the works. I know it's a lot, Dad, but it's my wedding. My only wedding." I stared at her, trying to see the little girl who'd once built sandcastles at my feet. Instead, I saw a determined woman ready to leap into the unknown. I thought of Lorraine, always the peacemaker, and what she'd want me to do. "Of course, honey. We'll make it happen." The words came out before I could stop them, heavy with the knowledge of everything I didn't say, that I barely knew Nate, that I worried she was rushing, that weddings built on quicksand rarely stood the test of time. But what could I do? She hugged me, all relief and gratitude, and I pretended my heart wasn't breaking. Later that night, the silence in my living room felt different. Heavy. I poured myself a bourbon, sat down, and tried to remember what it was like to have Lorraine beside me when big decisions needed making. I pulled out the old photo album she'd kept so meticulously, flipping through snapshots of Emily through the years. Toothy grins at Fenway, birthday candles blown out on the porch, her first day at Boston University, my arm around her shoulders. When had she grown up? When had I become just a checkbook and a signature at the bottom of her plans? My phone buzzed. Emily again. "Nate says dinner tomorrow, 7 at the Sail Loft. He wants to talk business with you. He admires what you built, Dad. Maybe you can give him some advice." I typed out a quick reply, agreeing, already dreading the conversation. Something about Nate always set my teeth on edge, his talk of startups and angel investors, his expensive taste and easy charm. But I had to try. For Emily, for Lorraine's memory, for my own peace of mind. I spent the night rehearsing questions, my old negotiating instincts kicking in. What did Nate really do? How did he plan to provide for my daughter? Why did every story he told sound just a little too good to be true? By the time I crawled into bed, the Boston skyline blinking in the distance, I'd made up my mind. I'd give Nate a fair shot. I'd give Emily her dream wedding. But if I found anything rotten beneath all the glitz, I wouldn't stand by and watch my only daughter walk into a storm. Little did I know just how quickly that storm would come. Dinner at the Sail Loft was everything I expected and nothing I wanted. The place buzzed with after-work energy, suits at the bar, tourists marveling at the harbor view, young couples lost in each other. Nate was already there when I arrived, spinning a story to the waitress and flashing that grin that always seemed a little too eager. Emily squeezed my hand. "Thanks for coming, Dad." Nate's really excited. He stood up to shake my hand, firm grip, steady eye contact the whole performance. Mr. Brooks, honored to finally sit down together. Emily tells me you're the sharpest businessman in Boston. He smiled, but it was all teeth. I gave him my best poker face. I've been around a while, Nate. Seen a few things. He launched into his pitch before we'd even ordered, some kind of tech startup based out of Cambridge. Revolutionizing urban transportation. Buzzwords flew. Seed round, market disruption, scalability. I listened, nodding occasionally, but the more he talked, the less substance I heard. I asked the questions no one else ever seemed to. So what's your revenue? Who's investing? What happens if the market changes? He danced around the answers, pivoting to charm, laughing off hard numbers. Emily looked anxious, eyes darting between us, twisting her napkin under the table. Nate noticed too, squeezing her hand. Your dad just wants to make sure I can take care of you, Em. I get it. That's what any good father would do. His tone was right, but I didn't buy it. He talked about the wedding, dropping hints about the pressure he felt. It's a big number, but your support means the world, Mr. Brooks. Not everyone's lucky enough to have a father-in-law who believes in their dreams. I grunted, swirling my club soda. Dreams are good. Paying your bills is better. He laughed, but it was hollow. The conversation drifted back to wedding details, and I found myself zoning out. Flowers, appetizers, cake flavors. My mind wandered to Lorraine, to the way she'd read people in seconds. That boy's selling something, she would have whispered in my ear. When dinner ended, Nate picked up the check with a flourish. Tonight's on me, Mr. Brooks. Least I can do for my favorite future father-in-law. I noticed he paid with a flashy black credit card, one I suspected belonged to someone else. Emily hugged me in the parking lot, whispering, "Thank you, Dad, for trying." I squeezed her tight, heart aching with the knowledge that the world could be so much harsher than she realized. Always, kiddo. But if you ever need out, you call me first. No matter what. That night, the city lights flickered against my window as I scrolled through Nate's social media, searching for clues. A handful of glamorous photos, fancy cars, exotic trips, selfies with people I didn't recognize. No family, no old friends, nothing real. I dug deeper, running his name through business databases, LinkedIn, even a few private contacts from my real estate days. What I found worried me. His so-called company existed, but just barely, a rented desk in a shared office, no employees, no product on the market. The more I searched, the clearer it became. Nate was selling an illusion, and Emily was the prize. Sleep didn't come easy. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, Lorraine's voice echoing in my mind. Don't let her get hurt, George. She's still our little girl. I promised myself I'd get to the bottom of it before it was too late. The weeks leading up to the wedding were a blur of appointments and anxiety. Emily was swept up in cake tastings and dress fittings, her excitement infectious, her stress obvious. She called me daily, asking about deposits and contracts, always with that hopeful edge in her voice. Nate called too, but only when money was involved. Hey, George, could you wire the deposit for the band? Florist needs payment up front. Caterer just bumped the price. Can you cover the extra? Every time I said yes, but with a growing sense of dread. I started keeping receipts, making a spreadsheet Lorraine would have admired, tracking every dollar. I didn't mind spending for my daughter's happiness, but I wasn't about to bankroll a scam. I visited the Pelham house, walked the beach where they take their vows, met with the vendors myself, each one surprised at how little they'd heard from the groom. One afternoon, I stopped by Nate's so-called office. It was emptier than a Sunday church. The receptionist gave me a polite smile, clearly used to disappointed investors. Nate works off-site most days, she offered. Always hustling, that one. I left with a pit in my stomach. As the wedding day approached, Emily grew quieter, her calls shorter, her excitement dimmed by Nate's short temper and endless demands. She brushed it off. "He's just stressed, Dad. He wants everything to be perfect." But I heard it in her voice: doubt, fear, confusion. The night before the wedding, I sat at my kitchen table, the old house quiet except for the rain. I looked at Lorraine's picture and whispered, "Wish you were here, hon, she needs you." I fell asleep with the lights on, knowing that the next day might change everything, not just for Emily, but for all of us. I woke up early on the morning of Emily's wedding, a cold wind rattling the window panes. Cape Cod was shrouded in fog, the kind of mist that made the world feel smaller and secrets easier to hide. I brewed strong coffee and tried to steady my nerves, running through my mental checklist: rings, suit, speech, and tucked away in my pocket, a small envelope I'd hoped I wouldn't need. The Pelham house buzzed with energy when I arrived. Staff hurried through the hallways, florists arranged peonies and blue hydrangeas, and a quartet rehearsed softly in the corner. Emily was a whirlwind of silk and nerves, surrounded by bridesmaids, her laughter bright but brittle. She clung to me for a moment. "Dad, can you believe it's really happening?" I smiled, brushing a stray curl from her cheek. "Of course I can, sweetheart. You're the most beautiful bride Cape Cod's ever seen." I didn't mention the worry gnawing at my insides or the restless night I'd spent trying to decide if I should say something, do something, anything, to stop her from making what might be the biggest mistake of her life. The ceremony itself was a vision out of a magazine. The ocean was a wall of silver behind them as Emily and Nate exchanged vows, her voice steady, his a little too polished. The guests applauded, the band played, and champagne flowed like water. If only happiness could be poured and refilled so easily. At the reception, the party shifted to high gear. Nate strutted around the dance floor, basking in attention. He slapped backs, winked at the photographer, and took every opportunity to mention his upcoming IPO. Emily glowed for a while, swept along in the current, but I caught her several times off to the side, watching Nate with a troubled frown. Dinner was a blur of toasts, laughter, and too many reminders of Lorraine's absence. I sat through Nate's best man speech, full of inside jokes and thinly veiled references to big plans. As the night wore on, I tried to convince myself I was overreacting, that maybe my old man's instincts were just running wild. But every time I looked at Nate, I saw masks slipping. I made the rounds, checking on vendors, making sure tips were handed out and bills were settled. That's when I caught wind of the first problem. The band leader found me near the kitchen. "Excuse me, Mr. Brooks. Nate said you'd handle the remaining balance for tonight?" I nodded, though I was certain I'd already wired the full amount. "Send me the invoice and I'll check my records." Then the florist approached, same story. The caterer, too. Each said the same thing: partial payments, promises from Nate that the rest would be covered by the family. I felt my face flush with embarrassment and anger. Had all those payments gone through, or was Nate redirecting funds? By the time Emily found me, I was already dialing the bank, my heart pounding in my chest. She took my hand, sensing something was wrong. "Dad, what is it?" I forced a smile. "Just making sure everything's perfect, Em. Don't you worry about a thing." But I worried plenty. Halfway through the evening, Nate cornered me by the balcony, the moon casting cold light on his too white smile. "George, you having a good time? You know, this whole day wouldn't be possible without your support." He clapped me on the back too hard. "Emily's lucky to have you." I studied him for a moment, the smell of expensive cologne, and the faintest whiff of fear under the surface. "You sure all the vendors are paid, Nate? I'm hearing otherwise." He brushed it off with a laugh. "Just a little mix-up. It's handled. No worries, old man. Relax and enjoy yourself, old man." He said it like a joke, but there was a sting to it. I didn't let him see my frustration. As the night wound down, guests gathered for the big farewell. Emily tossed her bouquet, friends cheered, and the newlyweds prepared to slip away to their honeymoon suite. That's when Nate's past finally caught up. A tall, broad-shouldered man in a charcoal suit strode into the hall, his presence part thunderstorm, part judge. The room hushed instantly. Nate's face turned the color of skim milk. "What the hell are you doing here?" he hissed. The man ignored him, looking right at me. "Mr. Brooks? Curtis Blackwell. I believe you, and I have some business to discuss. And I have some papers for your son-in-law." Gasps went around the room. Nate tried to bolt, but Curtis intercepted him, pressing a thick envelope into his hand. "You've been served, Mr. Simmons. Fraud. Embezzlement. Wire fraud. The list goes on." Emily stood frozen, her bouquet forgotten on the floor. "Nate! What is he talking about?" Nate tried to laugh it off, but his bravado was gone. He fumbled for words, hands shaking as he scanned the legal documents. Curtis turned to me, his tone gentler. "Mr. Brooks, you have my thanks for making it possible to track him down. We've been looking for Mr. Simmons for almost 2 years. The entire reception was silent, eyes locked on Nate as his world unraveled in front of everyone he tried to impress. For a second, I almost pitied him. Almost. Emily's pain was all that mattered now. I went to her, put my arm around her shoulders, and led her away from the mess Nate had created. "We'll get through this, Em. I promise. No matter what." Behind us, the perfect wedding became a crime scene, phone cameras raised, whispers flying, a fairy tale ending in disaster. And in that moment I knew, sometimes a father's love means stepping in, even if it means everything falls apart. The drive home from the Cape felt longer than it had in years. Emily was silent beside me, still in her wedding dress, her phone buzzing with messages she refused to answer. I kept glancing at her in the rearview mirror, the way she stared out the window, shoulders squared but trembling, the bouquet wilted in her lap. The car filled with the scent of salt and peonies, but it felt like we were leaving a funeral, not a wedding. Back at the house, I made tea the way Lorraine used to, letting the ritual slow my racing thoughts. Emily sat at the kitchen table, still dazed, swirling a spoon through her mug without drinking. Finally, she spoke, her voice hoarse. "Dad, how much of that did you know? Did you know what Nate was?" I set my cup down, the clink louder than I intended. "I suspected, Em. I didn't want to believe it, not at first. But the signs were all there. The money, the stories that didn't add up, the way he treated people. I tried to dig, but he was slippery." She nodded slowly, tears in her eyes but not falling yet. "I feel so stupid." "Don't you dare," I said softly. "You loved him. That's not stupid. The world's full of people who know how to spot a good heart and take advantage. You learned a hard lesson, but you're not alone." Emily finally looked up, and I saw Lorraine's steel in her eyes, the same stubbornness that had carried our family through tougher times than this. "What do we do now?" "We get through it," I said. "First, we call every vendor and cancel every outstanding payment. Whatever isn't delivered, we don't pay for. Whatever is, we negotiate. Curtis will handle the legal mess with Nate, he said so himself." We spent the next morning making calls: florist, caterer, band, photographer, hotel. Some were sympathetic, some were just business. I kept records of every conversation, every canceled payment. By lunchtime, the stack of bills had shrunk, but so had Emily's savings. The wedding was supposed to be the start of her new life, and instead she was sorting out the damage left behind by a man she thought she knew. The doorbell rang as I finished my sandwich. I opened the door to find Curtis Blackwell standing there, briefcase in hand. He offered a firm handshake, his expression all business but with a hint of kindness. "Mr. Brooks, Emily," he greeted us both. "I thought you'd like an update. The authorities have Nate in custody. He'll face trial for multiple counts: wire fraud, embezzlement, identity theft. Your cooperation made a difference, George. Thank you. Emily's voice was small. Will we ever see him again? Curtis hesitated. It's unlikely. He'll be tied up in legal battles for years. But if you're worried about your own liability, rest easy. You were victims, not accomplices. He handed me a folder. These are documents for the bank, the vendors, anyone who needs proof that Nate committed fraud. If anyone tries to collect, send them to my office. I thanked him, relief washing through me, though it did little to erase the ache I saw in Emily's face. After Curtis left, Emily finally allowed herself to cry, deep sobs that racked her entire body. I sat beside her, just as I had after her first skin knee, just as Lorraine would have, holding her until the storm passed. She eventually fell asleep on the couch, and I covered her with the old Red Sox blanket, hoping it might bring her some small comfort. That evening, I sat alone in my office, organizing receipts, cancellation notices, and Curtis's paperwork into neat folders. It wasn't until the sun slipped below the horizon that I allowed myself to feel the anger I'd been swallowing all week. Anger at Nate for what he'd done. Anger at myself for not seeing it sooner. Anger at a world where people like him could drift from city to city, leaving broken hearts and empty bank accounts in their wake. But most of all, I felt gratitude, for Curtis's help, for the friends and family who'd already reached out, for the strength I saw in Emily. She would recover. We both would. We were Brookses, after all. We didn't quit just because the wind turned against us. The next morning, Emily was up before me, dressed in jeans and one of Lorraine's old sweaters. She made breakfast, real breakfast, eggs and pancakes and coffee strong enough to put hair on your chest. She set a plate in front of me and managed a shaky smile. No more pity parties, Dad. If Nate thought he could ruin my life, he clearly never met a Brooks. I laughed for the first time in days, genuine and warm. That's my girl. We spent the day cleaning up, returning gifts, writing thank you notes to the few vendors who'd shown kindness, and ignoring the rest. Emily called her job and asked for her old hours back. By afternoon, she was making lists, setting goals, talking about the future. That night, as I stood on the porch, the spring air smelled like rain and hope. I looked up at the stars and spoke to Lorraine. We did it, hon. We kept her safe, even if she'll never know how much it cost. The worst was behind us, or so I thought. But life has a way of throwing curveballs, especially to those who think the inning is over. Spring on the Cape has a way of bringing things back to life. The daffodils came first, bright spots in the garden Lorraine once loved. Emily and I started taking long walks, down to the harbor, through the old neighborhood, sometimes just to clear our heads and remind ourselves that life could be good again. Neighbors waved and offered condolences, a few brought over casseroles and lemon squares. People can be kind, especially in a small town when news travels faster than the tide. Emily threw herself into work, spending late hours at the office, picking up extra shifts, filling her days so she wouldn't have to think about what was lost. She was tougher than I'd ever realized. Still, I caught her sometimes, staring out the window at dusk, twisting that old class ring of Nate's she'd found in a box of leftover wedding favors. She never said his name, but I knew what haunted her. I tried to keep my own routine. Mornings with the paper and too much coffee, afternoons fixing things around the house that didn't really need fixing. Evenings, I'd watch the Red Sox or reread Lorraine's favorite books, her handwritten notes in the margins of comfort when the world felt unsteady. I wanted to protect Emily, but you can't shield someone from their own heartache. All you can do is stand by and let them heal in their own time. One Saturday, I found Emily at the kitchen table with a stack of envelopes and a notebook. She'd made a list of everyone owed money for the wedding, vendors, friends who'd helped, a couple of relatives who'd flown in early and spent too much on hotels. She was determined to pay everyone back, even if it took years. You don't have to do this all alone, Em, I said, taking a seat across from her. She shook her head. I know you'd help, Dad, but this is my mess. I can fix it. Her voice was strong, no trace of self-pity. I admired her grit. Still, I offered to help her write the letters, tracking down addresses, digging through emails. One by one, we marked off names, and each check sent felt like closing the door a little more firmly on the past. Late that afternoon, the phone rang. It was Curtis Blackwell. He spoke quietly, but there was pride in his voice. Nate Simmons took a plea deal this morning. He'll be serving time and making restitution to his victims, including you and Emily. I thanked him, not sure whether to feel relief or something darker. Justice was done, but it wouldn't erase the pain or the lost trust. Emily just nodded when I told her, silent for a long time before she said, He doesn't get to live rent-free in my head anymore. With legal matters winding down, I found myself reflecting on what it meant to be a father. You spend decades trying to make sure your children never have to face the storms you did, only to realize you can't stop the wind from blowing. You can only teach them to build strong shelters, and to keep their doors open for when they need to come home. As the weeks passed, Emily began to emerge from her shell. She joined a book club at the library, started volunteering at a community garden. One Friday night, she brought home a dog, a scruffy mutt named Gus, who stole our hearts before he even finished his first bowl of kibble. Watching Emily laugh as Gus tore through the backyard, chasing a tennis ball, was the first time I truly believed she'd be all right. The world kept spinning. Bills got paid, routines returned, and slowly the house filled with new memories. Emily's friends came over for Sunday dinners, laughter filling the kitchen where sorrow once hung heavy. Sometimes, late at night, I'd hear her talking quietly on the phone, her voice lighter, more hopeful than I'd heard in months. One rainy evening, after we'd cleaned up from dinner, Emily sat across from me, Gus curled at her feet. Do you ever regret how you handled everything, Dad? Canceling the payments, helping Curtis track Nate down. I considered her question carefully. I regret the pain it caused you, Em. But I don't regret standing up for you, even when you didn't want me to. She nodded, reaching across the table for my hand. Thanks for not giving up on me. There was nothing more to say. Sometimes love looks like sacrifice, sometimes like tough decisions, sometimes just like being there, quiet, steady, and ready when you're needed most. Before bed, I found myself outside on the porch, watching the rain. I thought about Lorraine, about all the storms we'd weathered together, and the strength she'd passed down to our daughter. We did all right, hon, I whispered to the night. She's gonna be just fine. But life, as I've learned, doesn't end with the first sign of healing. Sometimes, the next chapter is waiting just around the corner. Summer settled over Boston, and the city seemed to breathe again. Emily started smiling more, the kind that wasn't just for show. Gus, our new four-legged tornado, kept us both busy. Walks along the Charles River, trips to the dog park, chewed-up slippers and all. I caught glimpses of Lorraine and Emily every day, the way she scolded Gus gently, how she organized her bookshelves by color, her stubborn streak when faced with a problem. There's comfort in seeing pieces of the past live on in the people you love. Work picked up for Emily. Promotions, new projects, invitations to office happy hours. She'd come home later and later, shoes kicked off by the door, dropping onto the couch with a tired but genuine grin. I'm good, Dad. Really. I believed her more each time. One Thursday, she invited me to join her and some friends for trivia night at a pub in Beacon Hill. I almost said no, old men and bars don't always mix, but she insisted, so I went. The place was packed, laughter bouncing off the brick walls, the smell of burgers and onion rings filling the air. Her friends welcomed me warmly, and by the second round, I was answering more history questions than the 20-somethings could handle. Emily beamed, proud and a little embarrassed. I realized something important that night. I wasn't just getting my daughter back. I was meeting the woman she'd become, resilient, funny, a survivor. She still stumbled sometimes, but she never stayed down for long. Every now and then, I'd get a letter in the mail about Nate's case, progress updates, small restitution checks, apologies from banks and vendors who'd been fooled like the rest of us. Each envelope was a reminder of the mess we'd crawled out of, and a sign that justice, slow as it may be, eventually comes around. One Saturday, as I washed my old pickup in the driveway, Emily joined me, a sparkle in her eye I hadn't seen in months. "Guess what?" she asked. "I got an offer to lead a project at work. It's big, Dad. Might mean some travel, maybe even a move someday." I feigned outrage. "Leave your poor old man alone in Boston? Who'll keep Gus from chewing the mailman's pant leg?" She laughed and elbowed me. "You'll have the neighborhood talking if you don't watch out." But beneath the jokes, I was proud. She wasn't just moving on, she was moving up. The world hadn't broken her, it had made her braver. As the weeks passed, we found our rhythm. Sunday mornings meant pancakes and the crossword puzzle. I'd read the headlines out loud, Emily would shout answers from the kitchen, and Gus would bark every time she got one right. The quiet pain that had haunted our house faded, replaced by warmth and a new kind of hope. The news from Curtis was steady. Nate Simmons pled guilty. 18 months in prison, restitution required, barred from financial work for a decade. I didn't gloat, but I slept easier knowing he couldn't hurt anyone else for a long while. One evening, as we sat out on the porch watching fireflies spark over the lawn, Emily turned to me. "I'm not sure what comes next," she admitted. "But I know I can handle it." I squeezed her hand. "You've already proved that, Em. Life doesn't always go according to plan, but the trick is knowing how to write a new one." The seasons kept changing, the garden Lorraine planted came into bloom, and our lives, damaged, tested, but not destroyed, grew richer than before. That August, we finally scattered some of Lorraine's ashes along the shore near Hyannis, just as she'd wanted. Emily read a poem, I told a story about how we'd met, and Gus tried to dig a hole in the sand, determined to add some mischief to the memory. It struck me then, this was what survival looked like. It wasn't perfect, and it wasn't painless. But it was honest, full of laughter, forgiveness, and the kind of love that stands up to the worst the world can throw at you. Back at the house, as the sun set over Boston and Gus snored at Emily's feet, I poured 2 mugs of tea, one for me, and one for Lorraine, just in case she was still listening. I looked at my daughter, strong and steady, and I thought, we've made it through the storm, old girl. She's ready for whatever comes next. But there was still one more lesson, one final conversation, before this story was truly done. September brought that crisp New England air, the kind that makes you reach for a sweater in the evening and remember every fall you ever lived through. The house felt settled, peaceful. For the first time since the wedding, Emily seemed genuinely light, her laughter rolling through the kitchen, her focus shifting from what was lost to what might still be found. One Saturday, as I was finishing up mowing the lawn, Emily came outside, a hopeful look on her face. "Dad, do you remember when Mom used to say every ending is just the start of something new?" I smiled, wiping my brow. "She said it so often I started writing it in birthday cards." Emily grinned, then grew serious. "I've been offered a transfer. Providence this time. It's a step up, running my own team. I want to take it. But it means leaving here, leaving you, at least for a while." I felt the ache in my chest, the old fatherly instinct to keep her close, fighting with pride at how far she'd come. "Lorraine would be proud," I told her. "So am I. You've earned every good thing that's coming to you." She hugged me hard. "You'll come visit, right? You and Gus both." "Try to stop us," I said, voice thick. "Just let me know when you want a proper home-cooked meal. I'll drive down with a trunk full of leftovers." We spent the next week sorting through old boxes, childhood art projects, Lorraine's recipe cards, even the faded napkin from our first date. Emily packed up what she needed, leaving behind things that didn't fit her new life but would always belong to our family story. The day she moved, the house was full of friends, neighbors, laughter, and more than a few tears. Gus tried to climb into the front seat beside her, howling when she shut the door, only to leap back out for one last chase around the yard. I handed her a Tupperware of my famous chili and a note Lorraine once wrote: "Home isn't a place, it's the people who show up for you when it matters." As she pulled out of the driveway, I stood on the porch, waving, feeling the full weight of time and memory. This wasn't goodbye, just another turn in the road. In the quiet that followed, I made myself a cup of tea, turned on the Red Sox game, and started a new journal, one for the next chapter. Life, I realized, is a collection of moments just like this: letting go, holding tight, starting over again and again. A few weeks later, Emily called from Providence, her voice bright and confident. She was thriving, making friends, leading her team, exploring her new city. She met someone, too, a teacher at the local high school. "He's nothing like Nate, Dad. He's kind. Steady. He listens." I heard the hope in her voice, cautious but real. I gave her my blessing, but told her she didn't need it. "Trust yourself, Em. You've learned more than most do in a lifetime." That Thanksgiving, she drove back with Gus in the passenger seat and her new friend, Michael, in tow. The house was noisy again, filled with warmth and stories, the kind Lorraine used to tell. I carved the turkey with shaky hands, watched Emily laugh, and felt nothing but gratitude for the pain that had shaped us, the healing that followed, and the love that had survived it all. After dinner, Emily found me out on the porch, where the air was sharp with the promise of winter. She squeezed my hand and said, "You know, Dad, I wouldn't have made it without you. Thank you for believing in me, even when I didn't believe in myself." I swallowed the lump in my throat and put an arm around her. "That's what parents do, Em. We keep the light on until you're ready to find your way." As the stars blinked awake above Boston, I realized my job wasn't finished. It never would be. Life keeps changing, keeps demanding new versions of ourselves, but love is the thing that never has to be rewritten. And if Lorraine was listening, I hope she'd agree, we'd done all right. Our girl was strong, the house was full, and there was always another story to tell.